Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies, and the Phils, with a little help from the Pirates, have clinched the first round bye in the National League. Well, one of them. Do they go for the 1 seed? We'll break it all down on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been doing sports talk radio here in Philly on 97.5 The Fanatic for 5 years now. I've been a 3-year credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and this is my 3rd season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. It's the number one way to say thank you for the content or that you enjoy the content. It also gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. Costs you nothing, super easy to do, but it really helps me out, so I appreciate it if you do that. And today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. So the Phillies had, they had taken their sweet time getting to this point where they could clinch a first-round bye. It seemed to be nearly inevitability by this point that they would be able to lock that down. But it took them a little bit, and you saw them lose the hangover game to the Cubs in game 2 of that series. And you're like, okay, well, if you somehow drop tonight's game, then you go to Washington and you might need to win 2 out of 3 if the Brewers keep winning. And then how does that affect everything? It was much easier this way. Credit to the Phillies for what they got done last night in a 9-6 victory over the Cubs. It wasn't Christopher Sanchez's best start, but it wasn't his worst start. He went 4 2/3 innings. He allowed 3 earned runs, 4 runs total, 1 home run, 4 strikeouts, 5 hits. Not awful, not great. Threw 94 pitches, wasn't very efficient. 94 pitches through 4 2/3 innings. But the bullpen got the job done. Jose Ruiz, Ryan Kirkering, Jeff Hoffman, Carlos Estevez all did what they needed to do. Estevez, the only earned run, and the game was pretty much out of hand at that point. He took over a 9-5 ball game in the 9th inning. So you feel pretty good about that, and you feel really good about the offense. I know the Cubs, whatever, like they're not fighting for anything, but Javier Assad, who they threw out there, pretty darn good pitcher. And the Phillies went ahead and took care of business against him and the Cubs bullpen. You look at it, and they've started to show a little bit of the power. Trey Turner went yard in the 1st inning. Nick Castellanos went yard. Cody Clemens broke an offer by going yard. And you also had really big games by Bryson Stott, who went 3 for 4 with 2 RBIs. Brandon Marsh, 1 for 4, but that one hit was a bases-clearing 3 RBI double. I mean, it was contributions up and down the lineup. So some good. And then also some not so good with Bryce Harper getting his elbow worked on in the dugout after a swing and a miss, which looked very concerning. We'll talk about that more coming up because we're talking about the first round bye now. But then we're going to talk about the strategy for the next series in Washington and how much you play guys, and also who do you want to play in the postseason. We'll talk about all of that on today's episode. But we'll dive into that Bryce Harper thing and conversations about health coming up. It was a good, comfortable win by the Philadelphia Phillies last night. They got everything they needed out of last night's game. And shout out to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Go check out Locked On Pirates as a thank you because they are the reason that you have the first round bye locked down as of this moment right now. They needed to beat the Brewers. They beat the Brewers 2-1. They locked them down late in that game, and the Brewers they're fighting. They're toiling to try and find their way to a first-round bye. They're not going to get it. Doesn't look like. Yeah, so, I guess that would make sense that they're eliminated from the first-round bye because the Dodgers are ahead of the Phillies still in the standings, whatever the case may be. Shout out the Pirates for getting the job done out there. And what does the first-round bye mean? Well, at its base level, it means that you don't play baseball again that's meaningful until October 5th. So that's some time off, time to rest, time to recuperate, time to focus in. You also get to have home field advantage in at least the NLDS, possibly the NLCS if the Dodgers are eliminated, or if you catch them in the final 3 games of the season, LA with 4 games left. And it also means that Well, you've incrementally increased your standing each of the past 3 postseasons. In 2022, it was just find a way in. We had a 10-year playoff drought going on in this town, folks. They found their way in as the final wild card team, and who could forget the magical run they went on? And in 2023, you're like, we don't want to back our way in. Forget that. No, let's go ahead and be in much better standing. We might not win the division, but we don't want to be the last team in. The Phillies took care of that. They were the top wild card seed in the National League postseason picture last year, and they went to the NLCS. Now, some people have brought up that there's this negative correlation with final finishing position based on the higher seeding. I just think that's coincidence over 2 years. Like, that's not a big enough sample size where I'm like, wow, if they're a higher seeded team, they finish worse. If they're the last wild card team, they'll go to the World Series. If they're the top wild card team, they'll go to the NLCS. If they're the first round bye team, are they getting knocked? Like, no. You can't think about it that way. That's just, it's a ridiculously small sample size. There's no validity to that whatsoever. If it happens, it will be purely coincidence, and it has nothing to do with the standing that the team has going into the postseason. So I'm not worried about it from that perspective, but it shows me that the Phillies are setting higher goals every year. They're looking to improve upon their regular season success every year. And this has been the most successful Philadelphia Phillies regular season since really, 2010, 2011? It's been a long time, folks. That was the last time that they hoisted a division trophy, a division title, I should say. And they're in as good a position as those teams were to make a run at this thing. And we know they didn't win it in 10. They didn't win it in 11. They didn't even go to the World Series. They didn't win the pennant. Okay, sure. That was 13, 14 years ago. I'm not worried about what the success of this team in the past has been. I'm worried about this year's team putting themselves in as good of possible position to succeed in the postseason. And I believe getting the first round bye is a major benefit to this team. You know what else is a major benefit to this team? We don't talk about this enough. The fact that the Philadelphia Phillies have not only locked down a first round bye, but they've done so by making sure their players are healthy in the most important part of the season. Think about it. The rotation, Wheeler healthy, Nola healthy, Sanchez healthy, Ranger Suarez healthy. To have the 4 guys you're going to throw in the postseason all feeling good, that is a rarity. Then let's go to the lineup. Your best catcher is healthy in JT Realmuto. Your best first baseman is relatively healthy enough to play in Bryce Harper. Stott's fine. Turner's fine. Bohm's fine. In right field, Nick Castellanos wants to play all 162 games. He's more than fine. In center field, Rojas is ready to go. Brandon Marsh is ready to go. In left field, Austin Hayes is back from his kidney infection. That's great news. In the bullpen, your high leverage guys, Estevez, Hoffman, Strahm, Alvarado, Kerkering, all good to go. Do you know how hard it is to deliver a healthy baseball team over 162 games to the postseason? Like, you could not be better set up. You couldn't be. That's credit to Rob Thompson for threading the needle perfectly. Same with Dave Dombrowski and what he did at the trade deadline, getting what his team needed to sustain them, but not too much or not too little. We'll see how it plays out in actual postseason competition, but in setting yourself up for it. And remember, we talked a couple times on this podcast about those Pat Gillick comments. Pat Gillick, the GM of the team back in 2008 when they won the World Series. We talked about his comments about how it's luck in the postseason. And you can put your team in there and put them in a good position and then let the chips fall where they may. Well, the Phillies have put themselves in as good a position as possible. There's one more step ahead of where they're at right now that you could argue, hey, I'd like to see them go get the 1 seed. So you have home field advantage guaranteed in the NLCS. If you're better than the American League counterpart 1 seed, home field advantage guaranteed in the World Series. And maybe I'm silly for not caring as much about that, but I don't know. There's arguments about the 2 seed being the better positioning. We'll talk about on today's episode about that. There's argument about it's better to rest the players than chase down the 1 seed compared to the 2 seed. But then there's the argument about home field advantage. I don't honestly know. I don't. I think we're shooting in the dark right now, and somebody's going to hit a target, and that person's going to act like they knew it the whole way, or that group of people or fans are going to act like they knew it the whole way. Oh, they shouldn't have rested. They should have gone for the 1 seed. Oh, they shouldn't have gone for the 1 seed. Look at this that happened. Or they got tired out. Like, we're not going to know till we know. But it's never a bad thing to have that first round bye. The Phillies avoid a wild card series, which that's awesome. With the way the National League postseason is this year, look at some of the teams that could be in the wild card series. The Brewers, the Braves, the Mets, The Diamondbacks, like those teams, the Padres, one of those teams, and the Padres or the Dodgers, is going to be playing a 3-game wild card series. That's crazy. Do you really want like the San Diego Padres to have to play them 3 games and maybe you run into 2 bad games and the next thing you know, all of this was for naught? Yeah, not me either. I'd rather play a 5-game series. I'd rather play a 7-game series than another 7-game series, and I'd rather hoist the World Series trophy than take my chances in the wild card round. Forget that. The Phillies don't have to worry about it, though. They have the first round bye. They are in great position. They have 94 wins. The most they could finish with is 97, which, by the way, is my prediction preseason, right on the dot. Could they sweep the Nationals? And how do they handle this final series of the year? Well, those are the questions that we're going to hopefully answer, or at least I'll give my opinion on, coming up next as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Prize Picks, though. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. You're not playing other people. You're not beating anybody's score. No, you're just putting together a lineup of 2 to 6 player stats that you pick more or less on. And if you get them right, well, you're in the money. They're running some great deals right now. Not only can you now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, but one Caleb Williams passing yard, quarterback, Chicago Bears, gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. So that's an auto. You can check off one of those 4 that you need for the 100 times your money right there with the Caleb Williams deal. That's right. All you need is 1 yard, and you get an automatic win every football weekend in September. So look at that this weekend coming up. You got Thursday Night Football. The Phils will play 3 more regular season games. So many options on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks. You'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's talk about this series with the Washington Nationals. I'm not going to totally break it down. We'll do that on tomorrow's episode, so stay tuned for that. But we do need to have a conversation about the overview of how Rob Thomson is going to handle things. And I don't think there's a right answer. I don't know necessarily that there's a wrong answer. And I do think that I found a good middle ground. You might be like, Connor, you sound like you're waffling. What in the world are you talking about? Okay. I'll lay out the 2 schools of thought again. So you play a pretty darn bad team in the Washington Nationals. Not as bad as they've been in the past, but a team that has nothing to play for. I mean, you just played an 80-something win Cubs team. When you look at the Nationals, they're 69 and 90. So, yeah, you're the significantly better team. You're almost 50 wins. Not a math guy. You're almost 30 wins. That might be the worst one I've ever done on the podcast. Man, are you serious, Connor? You're almost 30 wins better than this team in the win column. So you have a great opportunity. And plus, the pitchers that you have lined up are Ranger Suarez for game 1. You have Zach Wheeler for game 2. And you have Aaron Nola throwing in game 3. So 3 of your top 4 arms, those guys are going to be postseason guys. You're not going to change around the rotation because, well, you've guaranteed yourself a week off. The Phillies will not play baseball again after Sunday, September 29th. They won't play again until October 5th. So you'll have normal rest or extended rest for all of your starting pitchers. And here's what you want to do. Well, here are the 2 schools of thought, right? The Nationals, they're not very good. You could beat these teams or this team. You could find a way to sweep them. And if you do, well, you get 3 wins. And when you look at the standings and where the Dodgers are at right now, the Phillies are a half game back on the Dodgers. But part of that is because the Dodgers have played 1 less game. If the Dodgers lose to the Padres this evening, well, you're going to be dead even with the tiebreaker. You're a game and a half up on the Yankees on the American League side of the bracket, so you feel good about that. You've played 1 more game than the Yankees, though, so they've got to make up a game, and they could cut down. I don't know. It's pretty close. The margins are pretty tight, but you could find a way. If the Dodgers lose tonight technically you win out, you're the 1 seed in all of baseball, right? So maybe you look at that game. I wonder if Rob Thompson looks at LA, San Diego tonight and says, man, doors open for the top seed. Do I go get it? That's one of the arguments. Or you say, I kind of like the 2 seed. I kind of like who we match up with there. It's relatively similar to the 1 seed for me. It may be a moot point if you don't play like the Yankees or the Dodgers, or even if you finish behind the Dodgers, but ahead of every team in the American League, you'd still be the home field team in the World Series. So the only series you could potentially not be the home team in would be a series with the Dodgers in the NLCS, which feels like it could be a pretty darn big series and a possible scenario. But they could gamble and say, hey, we don't really feel as strongly about doing that as opposed to resting our players. So those are the 2 schools of thought. Do you chase down the 1 seed? Do you not chase down the 1 seed? I do think there is a middle ground that has begun to reveal itself as you hear what Rob Thompson has to talk about. Now, I want to tell you some things that Rob Thompson said last night after clinching the top 2 seed, the first round bye, all of that stuff over the Cubs. He talked about the series with the Nationals, and he said, well, those guys are going to throw, talking about his starters. Suarez, Wheeler, Nola, they're going to go out there and they're going to throw. Now, will it be 4 innings, 5 innings, 7 innings? I don't know, but they're going to at least get out there and make starts. He did say, too, Rob Thompson, that you don't want to burn all your bullpen guys in the final series of the year. Not that they don't have time, but it's just like you don't want to overuse them or you don't want to put them at unnecessary risk. Pitching's weird, man. 1 throw here, knock on wood, 1 throw there, and next thing you know, you're a little banged up. Like, you got to be careful. You don't want to throw this away at the last second by doing something that's a little bit hasty when it comes to chasing something that may not be all that important, right? So there's that balance. He's also going to get guys some days off. Like, I'd be surprised with Bryce Harper's elbow looking the way it did when he had training staff working on it in the dugout last night in that game against the Cubs. He did not come out of the game, but I'd be surprised if Bryce Harper plays I want to say more than 1 game in Washington. I think he plays 1 game. I'd play him Saturday. I'd give him Friday off. I'd give him Sunday off. Get him 1 more game to get some at-bats in. That's how I'd finish out Bryce Harper's season. Maybe he DHs 1 game, even though it seems like swinging is what bothers it, his elbow and wrist. But that's the thing. Give him some time. Give Kyle Schwarber some time. Give JT Realmuto some days off. I would have Stubbs catch 2 of these 3 games in this series against the Nationals. Like, Castellanos wants to play all 162. Cool. Put him out there in right field. Tell him to be careful. I don't know. I'd give Rojas and Marsh some time. I'd give Stott some time. Edmundo Sosa is going to play a couple different positions. Cody Clemens is going to play a couple different positions. I'd give Trey Turner some time. Boom. Like, your starters, I don't know. I would look at it as a kind of revolving door of sitting down 3 to 4 starters a game, right? 3 to 4 of your regular 9 I would have out of the game. The only guys that I would play in all 3 of these games would be Austin Hayes and Nick Castellanos. Hayes because he literally just came back from the kidney infection and he needs to get his swing back and his feel back for the game and everything like that. And Casty because he could play 162, and that would be an awesome accomplishment. I can't tell you the last time a Phillies player played 162 games. They don't do that very often. They certainly don't do it under Rob Thompson. So Nick Castellanos doing that would be an accomplishment. And I'm sure for him personally, that'd be something where he'd be able to say, hey, I was an Iron Man this year. That feels great. Now let's go get this postseason. So it depends on what the players are comfortable with as well. But I think that's the middle ground, right? You throw your starters 4, maybe 5 innings, 70 to maybe 80 pitches. Then you get them out of there. You throw the bullpen guys that you can get away with throwing. Maybe your low leverage guys, maybe 1 high leverage guy a night if you can get away with it and just get everybody their work in. And then you have a rotating cast of 3 to 4 starting position players that are out for each of these 3 games. You start some guys that are backups. You get everybody days. That way you are still competitive. Here's the thing. You might be able to just kind of accidentally beat the Nationals 2 games out of 3. You might be able to accidentally sweep them. Like, you might be able to throw out the B squad and say, hey, go beat the Nationals. You might be able to. Who knows? They're not that good of a baseball team. All due respect. I don't mean to keep taking ricochet shots at the eliminated Nationals whose season has been over for a long time, but it's just being realistic. You don't have to go all out to beat these teams, or this team, I should say. And so I think that's the perfect middle ground. You can let me know what your strategy would be if you would go all out for this final series to try and get that 1 seed, if you would be even more conservative than I'm being. How you feel about Rob Thompson's comments about what they're planning on doing. Like, let me know what you think in the comments, because I don't think there's a right answer. So I think trying to find the most middle ground possible is usually the prudent solution in situations like this. That's just how I feel, though. You could have a totally different opinion. I wouldn't fault you on that one bit. We're still trying to figure this out. I mean, the Phillies, this is the first time in this new wild card setup where they play 3-game series that they've ever not been in the wild card setup. So we're learning too. And we also know that the Braves have had pitfalls with this week off, and Dodgers have had pitfalls with this week off. So there's a lot of stuff, trial and error, that's ongoing around baseball, not just with the Philadelphia Phillies right now. We'll see how it plays out, but that's my strategy. Let me know what you think. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a dangerous conversation, one that I'm going to word very, very carefully. The who do you want to play in the NLDS conversation, because this can come back to bite you, but it can also give you the easiest possible path to the World Series and your ultimate goal. How do you pick that out? How do you balance it? Does it determine what seed the Phillies should be fighting for? We'll talk about all of it as we wrap up today's episode. But let's talk about Booking.com. Booking.com can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Especially this time around postseason time, there's some big games going on around the country. Maybe the Phillies will have to travel a little bit. Well, they will in the NLDS at least once. Maybe it's somewhere local. Maybe they'll be taking on the Mets. Maybe they'll be taking on, well, the Braves are a little bit further away, but still an East Coast team, and you want to go travel. Well, Booking.com can help you with all your accommodations. They're absolutely amazing. You can go to the website. You can download the app. They'll help you out with everything, with the hotel, with the plans. They are full service, man. Booking.com takes care of everything so that you can get your best possible stay on vacations. Now, it doesn't have to be a baseball vacation. I don't want you to think that Booking.com is just baseball. Now, they are an official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball, so they know what they're doing when it comes to ball game trips. But don't think that's all you have to do. I mean, winter's rolling around. You want to get your last vacation before you settle in for the long winter here up in the Northeast? Well, you can do that with Booking.com. They're amazing. You got to go ahead and check them out. They can help you find your right stay in any U.S. city, even your rival. So go ahead and check out the website, Booking.com, or you can look up the Booking.com app on any of the app stores. They'll be able to set you up, help you out. They're amazing. So go ahead and again, listen, Booking.com, check them out, because it's more like Booking.yeah. All right, let's talk about this who do you want to play conversation. And a lot of this is going to have to deal with the standings. Now, the way that this works, because baseball does not reseed, they have the bracket, and the bracket stays the same. It's not like you get the lowest or whatever. So when you look at how that matches up, the Philadelphia Phillies currently in the postseason bracket are the 2 seed. The Dodgers would be the 1 seed, which means the Dodgers could potentially get, and here's how the setup is, right? The 2 middle wildcard teams, so the top wildcard team and the second wildcard team, play each other. The final wildcard team plays the lowest division winner. The way that breaks out right now would be the Milwaukee Brewers, the lowest divisional winner, would play the final wildcard team. At this moment, that's the Arizona Diamondbacks. So Milwaukee, Arizona. Then the Mets and the Padres would play each other in the other side of the bracket. That would be because it has the potential to be the lowest seeded, or not the lowest seeded team, but the lower seeded team. Because Milwaukee, the divisional winner, you don't want them playing the 1 seed. You would be looking at a situation where the Phillies would be playing either Milwaukee or Arizona. The Dodgers would be playing either San Diego or the Mets. Now, I don't know how much you've kept up with what San Diego is doing. I know you've kept up with what the Mets are doing because we've talked about it. Those are 2 really hot baseball teams right now that look very dangerous for October. Do I think the Phillies are better than both those teams? Absolutely. But I don't really want either of those teams all that much. The Mets, maybe, because I do think that their pitching has not been amazing. Lindor has a back issue. I wouldn't be overly concerned about the Mets. A healthy amount of respect, a divisional opponent. It's going to be a tough series, but it's not like, oh man, that's the team we drew. The most dangerous team below the Philadelphia Phillies in the standings, I think, is the San Diego Padres. If they played the Dodgers, I've already heard from, listen, Jason Stark comes on our radio station on 97.5 The Fanatic Weekly. He said if the Padres played the Dodgers, he'd be picking the Padres to upset the Dodgers. That's how good they've been playing, and you just saw them knock off the Dodgers in game one, and then drop a game to the Dodgers that was a one-run game last night. So I don't want San Diego. And the Mets, they feel kind of tricky to me. Like, I don't want to open up Pandora's box and play a division rival and deal with that. Now, this could all shift depending on what Atlanta does. Because if there's one team that I do not want in the divisional series, it's the damn Atlanta Braves. Because I can just feel it a million miles away. I can feel it coming in the air tonight, as Phil Collins once said. Like, when you look at the storylines for that series, the Atlanta team barely sneaks in. They've got all these injuries. They got nothing to lose. They come up here, and the roles are reversed after the Phillies magically find a way to beat them 2 straight years in the postseason as the underdogs. Well, now Atlanta's the underdogs. The Phillies are the division champs. How great would it be if they righted all the wrongs? And third time's the charm. And all of this makes me sick to my stomach even saying it. I don't want Atlanta. I don't want them. And part of it is because of that intangible storyline type of feel of like they owe us one. Part of it is, Chris Sale's pretty darn good in the pitching for Atlanta. Reynaldo Lopez has been awesome. Like, that's my number one team that I don't want to face. I don't want the Braves. I don't care about the injuries. I don't want to open up that to possibility. And I guess the Mets should probably be in that conversation too, but they just don't scare me the same way because their pitching is not quite as good. But when you look at these teams, Milwaukee's bullpen's awesome. Their starting's been solid. Their offense has been pretty good. Arizona is the team that I want. I want the Arizona Diamondbacks as the top team for the Philadelphia Phillies to play. And it's not because I don't have respect for them, and it's not because I don't think they can't beat the Phillies. Clearly they can. They handled the Phillies in the regular season this year. They knocked them out last year in the postseason. But let me talk about the mentality that the Philadelphia Phillies would have if they faced Arizona in the NLDS. The thought process is, well, we owe these guys one. They took away our chance at a World Series last year. We would probably have beaten that Texas Rangers team. And I know that's unfair to the world champion Texas Rangers to say. But the Phillies would have had to have felt like they were the better team in that series. And they had 2 games at home to clinch, and they blew it. And Arizona talked all that trash after, and rightfully so. They deserved it. They were the better baseball team in those 7 games. They found their way to the World Series, and credit to them for it. But this year, I know that there's, like, if you're not going to get up and zone in for that series, we talk about like the rust or the focus after a week off. Dude, if you're not going to get amped up for that series, if that's not going to bring it out of you, I don't know what is. These guys took your lunch money last year and didn't deserve it. And you want to go get them now. That's how I would feel if I'm a Phillies player. And on top of that, here's what's the more tangible thing. The Arizona Diamondbacks have the 27th best ERA in baseball as a pitching staff. They've not pitched well at all. And I know a lot of their pitchers have had injury issues throughout the year, but they have a great offense. They have really bad pitching. And guess what? Pitching travels in the postseason. Offense doesn't always. We saw it last year with the Phillies. So, yeah, that's the team that I would look at and say, hey, we would like to match up with them. Now, I'd also take the Mets. The Padres would be a nightmare scenario. The Brewers are a darn good team. They'd probably be the second least favorite team. Well, third least favorite. So it would go Braves least favorite because of the storylines. Padres second least favorite because they're the team that is hottest in the National League right now. The Brewers because, well, they're probably the highest quality team of any of those teams you could possibly play overall, even though the Padres pretty darn good. It's tight between the two of them. And then I guess the Mets would be the second most preferable team, even though they're a division rival. Those are my thoughts. That's how I break it down. But again, you don't want to pick the opponent, even though the 2 seed will put you with 2 of your better choices, it seems like. Picking your opponent has never been something that I feel like worked out well. Karmically, it feels wrong to do. So bottom line is this. The Phillies are going to be a better team than any team they play in the NLDS. They will be favored. They should win. Let whoever's going to come here, come here. Have fun at Citizens Bank Park, folks. We don't think you will. That's the bottom line. You got to go out and prove it no matter who you play. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for checking us out today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make your next listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, Sully, he's breaking down a lot of stuff with the divisional and postseason races around baseball. So go ahead and check out Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube. Check them out next. And tomorrow, we're going to preview on the actual X's and O's side, the series with the Nationals, and just kind of start to get primed up for the postseason. It'll be a great time. Again, please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on our next episode.